Today on Locked On Red Wings, should expectations shift for the Detroit Red Wings in the wake of all of these injuries? Also, previewing the next game against the Ottawa Senators.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, while Scotty is a freelance journalist for the Detroit News, as well as the host of Locked On Tigers. Lots of things to talk about today. It was kind of an impromptu, kind of weird, unorthodox mailbag. I kind of just tweeted it out randomly at noon. It was a slow news day. We didn't hear anything new about Filip Hronek. We did hear about Ryan Reaves, and we'll comment on that, but we're not going to, go full in depth on anything anymore. You can hear our thoughts yesterday on that. Nothing about Larkin yet as of recording this at 5:30 on Thursday. So outside of a preview, we kind of had an open slate. So I threw it out to you guys. Wanted to hear what you guys wanted us to talk about. And you guys came back with a couple of good ones that we wanted to comment on. And one of the main ones was something that Scotty and I had talked about as well, in the shifting expectations of this team. And then also, with all these injuries and given who's playing well on the roster and who's not, do you shake up what's left of this roster and maybe give other guys opportunities they currently weren't getting? So we'll talk about that on today's episode, as well as that game preview of the Ottawa Senators. But first, Scotty, I wanted to talk about or follow up on the Ryan Reaves thing. So the NHL,
one last time, can we promise?
Because it's just news. It's no.
No, I know. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm ready to never talk about it again.
Yeah.
To be honest with
done.
you, so
I tweeted it out today. I was like, "There's people still in my replies fighting over it." The NHL made their decision. They're not going to look at it. It's not a suspension. They came out their ruling. They said that it was incidental contact and that his elbow was tucked. And I won't disagree with that, but I still feel principal contact was the head. NHL disagrees. There's nothing I can do about it. All we can hope for right now is that Filip Hronek is healthy, but we still don't know. We haven't heard yet on Dylan Larkin or Filip Hronek when they're going to be ready to play, how bad they're hurt, if they're hurt at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really at this point, I'm just concerned about, my team's players' health. I'm whatever. The situation didn't go the way you and I thought it did. There's certainly a lot of people that agree with the decision. There's a lot of people that disagree with the decision. It is what it is. The decision's final, and NHL is obviously in charge. So that's really all there is to it. We don't need to spend any more time arguing about if it was clean or not. At the end of the day, at this point, I'm just worried about Hronek's health and how soon he's going to be able to get back out there.
Yep, and I'm worried about how the Red Wings will perform. And I think that question you just posed is perfect transition into the first question we got. Let me pull it up on Twitter so I can credit the Twitter follower who came up with the question. And this comes from AceFishing1 on Twitter. Great username. I love that.
Great news.
I'm sorry, that's the other question. Sorry, wrong. Cross that out, guys. We'll get to that later, Ace Fishing. I will
credit. Never mind.
It wasn't him. We'll get to your question, Ace Fishing, in segment 2. But this one comes from Carol Lining at _JoeBot. He asks, with the team downward spiraling due to injuries similar to last year, are your season expectations still the same, or have they changed? And what are they now? Is this changing with what Yzerman will be doing at the trade deadline? Well, I can say for certainty when it comes to the trade deadline part of the question, I have no idea, because who knows in February or March, whenever it is, who's going to be healthy and who's not going to be healthy. So I think it's a little bit premature to make have any conversation about trade deadline expectations. But I think it's perfectly fair for us to talk about our expectations on the season as a whole, given the plethora of injuries the team is facing right now.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think that it's ridiculous to start looking at what happens at the trade deadline. As far as expectations for the rest of the season, I mean, they have to change. There's no way you can look at, what is it, over a third or close to a third of your salary is currently on the injured
I got
list.
The tab open. Let me pull it up.
That's insanity. There's no way we can just ignore that and be like, oh yeah, business as usual. Oh, you got to work through injuries. Yes, you do, but Like, I think it's if Larkin and Hronek were to both end up on the IR, it would be over a third of our salary would
More
be
than
on the
that,
injured
almost
list.
half.
Yeah,
Because
it would be 30 of 80
it'd be 30 of your current $80 million payroll because you have
if the two of them were to go on there. Without the two of them, it's still 20 of 80, which
yes.
is what, a quarter. So
You have $15 million tied up in the guys on the IR right now. And then Jacob Vrana, who's in the player assistance program, is another 5. Larkin is 6. Hronek is 4. These are rough, guys. I'm not doing the actual math, but it'd be
no, but
roughly.
I mean, this is via Cap Friendly is giving us a nice guesstimate here. Yeah.
Yeah. You have an $80 million cap hit right now. That's what your payroll is at. A little over $20 million is currently on or injured or in the player assistance program, not playing for the team. And then if worse comes to worse, and we don't know this yet, we don't know the status as of recording this of Hronek and of Dylan Larkin. But if both those guys go in the IR, like you said, Scotty, that's over $30 million. So yeah, your expectations have to change at that point. You have to look at what's left of this roster, and it's not a nice it's not a nice conversation because we talked about it yesterday that the Detroit Red Wings are in for some unfun hockey. Thankfully they play Ottawa next, although they're hot, but they're a team that's lower in the standings who you should be able to compete with. But these games in this stretch where if you were completely healthy, if you had that roster that all those guys in the IR were currently healthy, the Dallas game, the Panthers game, the game last night against the Wild, I would have said those are games that the Red Wings have a legitimate shot at stealing, or not even stealing, but just winning outright. But with all the injuries, your expectations of the team shift. Right now, it's going to be Michael Rasmussen or Joe Veleno, who are your number one seed, because stylistically they match both with who you want on the wing. So it's a tough predicament to be in. And so if you're talking long-term about expectations, I mean, my expectations were always the 85-point range. If you could get to 85, hit the over on what the betting odds sites said you would be. That's still an 11-point
improvement.
An 11-point improvement. And I think when the guys get healthy, they'll still hit that. I think they're still good enough to hit that because remember, you got out to a hot start and we're performing better. So I think short-term, yes, your expectations shift. Games that looked like they were winnable don't look so winnable anymore. But long-term, I think your expectations are still in the wheelhouse of at least what I thought, because I knew you weren't going to stay at that 100-plus point pace in the entire season like they were at. I knew eventually something would happen. I just didn't think it would all happen at once.
No, of course not. But I also think that I want to say basically what you just said, but in a different wording. Like I agree with everything you said, but my viewpoint of it is if we go back like in a time machine to before the season started and you and I were doing like those best and worst case scenarios for players, right? You remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Best case scenario in the immediate future is you keep your head above water while everyone's hurt. No one's asking you to have a third of your payroll, a quarter of your payroll be on the injured list and be off the ice and go out and win every game and beat the Lightning and et cetera, et cetera. But this season is still salvageable if you can get through like the next whatever it is, like month if it ends up being month and a half, et cetera. However long it ends up being, that bridge from today until you start getting the trickle effect of some of those players back off the injured list and back into the swing of things.
Mm-hmm.
And best case scenario at this point, I mean, it's unfortunate that this is kind of like the outlook, I guess, but best case scenario is just keeping your head above water. Like just keep swimming. Just you're gonna lose to the teams that are way better than you. But yeah, probably. Like this is a really thin team now. But if you can just salvage a few wins and get some points off of teams that you are still expected to beat or whatever, it's gonna be ugly at times, and it's not. It might not be fun at times even, but I think if you can just get through the next however long it ends up being, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, and just keep your head above water until some of those players start getting back into the mix, then you can absolutely still reach our expectations of what this team was thought of to be this season for
I
sure.
love
And that's because of, like you said, the luxury of how hot of a start they got off to.
I love your outlook on that. I love the optimism that you install into that this crummy situation that the Red Wings are in. It's going to suck, and I think it's probably about 2 weeks. You're probably in for about 2 weeks of really rough hockey here, and not saying
Probably
that we
through
won't
the
win
new
hockey
year.
games because
Safe
they beat
to
the
say.
Tampa Bay Lightning with almost nearly all of these guys hurt. So it is possible that they can still win hockey games. I'm not saying they're never going to win in the next 2 weeks, but I mean, if you're looking at it, I think short-term expectations shift exactly what you were saying. But if they can, like you said, hold their head above water, they'll still be in this fight because it's probably going to be 10 to 14 days to getting Hronek back if he's concussed. And then Oli Mata's got an illness. I don't know what kind of illness it is, enough for him to go in the IR, but I would imagine that doesn't keep him out for too long unless it's like mononucleosis in his liver or whatever it is, spleen gets inflamed. I mean, you're going to get your best defensive pairing back hopefully shortly. And then across the new year, you'll get Robbie Fabry back. You're going to get Tyler Bertuzzi back. So if you can make it to New Year's Day with your head above water and you're still in
That's what I
shooting
was
range of
thinking
the
too. If you
playoffs.
can make it to
Yeah.
like early or mid-January and just like you don't just lose every game from now until then,
Yeah.
I think that you can really still salvage this product for sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And then, you don't put any expectations on it, but if Vrana is ever healthy enough to come back,
Right.
that's a huge. So I think you're spot on. If you can just keep your head above water for long enough, things will start to get better. But for the meantime, short-term expectations, to kind of answer the question, short-term expectations definitely shift. But long-term, I think you're still looking at 85 points. I would be surprised if these guys, don't come back and make an impact enough to keep you on that trajectory.
They would have to
But
be like worst case scenario injury wise, like
yes,
across the board for I think that I think it's still too early in the season to shift about like what's going to happen in the last, like 4 or 5 months in the season when there's a chance that a lot of these guys, hopefully, knock on wood with what's been happening lately, but hopefully come back in the next, 2 to 6 weeks.
absolutely. So, and we got to get to a break here, but when we come back, we'll do the natural transition of talking about who's injured to who's not, and seeing who can step up and maybe what lines you could see mixed up when we come back. But first, got to talk to you guys about drunk driving and why you shouldn't do it. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. No big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on the roads to save lives. So if you think it's okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get ahead. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. I'm leaving that in. My pen's not working. Here we go. We're going to get into it. Here we go. Segment 2. Locked On Red Wings podcast. This pen's new too. I don't know why it was not working. So this next question comes from, you guessed it, Ace_fishing1. I'm not going to read his entire @ because it is a bunch of numbers. But he says, here's a topic. Let's talk about how at barely 12 minutes per game, Hronek, Berggren, and now Soderblom are looking like the best players on the team with the eye test. They don't have the numbers, but they also haven't played in every game. I may be off by a couple, but in 7 games, he just rattles off some numbers. Perron and Hronek have both have 4 points in the last month, and the rest are spread out across the lineup. Just saying, LOL. So that's not really a question, more of a statement, but I think what they're asking is, with the production level you're seeing from the fourth line, and Berggren has been great, Zarnik's been effective. Are we looking at, and with how thin this depth is, are we looking at maybe shaking up the lineup and giving guys an opportunity who haven't previously gotten opportunities at bigger roles?
I mean, like, yeah, like you kind of have to again, like immediately, right? Like you don't really have a choice for the immediate future for sure. I
Also,
think that
not mentioning Adam Ernie's name there, disrespectful. Adam Ernie's been great.
Yeah. No, what is he leading the team in hits still? Enforcer
Maybe.
Ernie? But no, I think that is, again, if you were to try to put some optimism on this situation, it is that when injuries happen, you have the ability to give a player who usually does not get as prominent of a role, more prominent of a role. And that's like pretty much the only upside to injuries in most people's views. But it is, something that you can at least try and spin positively, I guess. The big one for me personally is Soderblom. I think that's somebody who over the next couple of weeks could get a lot more ice time than he was used to when this team was fully healthy. And I think that can only really be good for development. And yeah, so that's someone specifically. Everybody, yes, everyone's going to have to step up and fill in roles. But Soderblom's the one specifically that I'm particularly excited about, just because, for at least whatever it's worth, we'll be able to see more of him.
Adam Ernie, for reference, has 90. Well, of course, the site just refreshed randomly. 90 hits. The next highest is Moritz Seider at 64.
Yeah.
So Adam Ernie is throwing his body around, which is great to see. No, I completely agree with you. You have to, but I think the crux of the question is, do you move guys like who you would not expect, like a Hronek, up in the lineup? And I don't think you move him any higher than the third line, because one of my counterpoints is, yes, they're playing pretty well in the role that they're being given right now, but that's exactly it. In the role they're being given, they're not playing against your top line. You put them on line 2 and line 1, suddenly their production, what they do have, drops off steeply. You can't. Hronek's not a top line guy. The reason he's playing effectively is because he's playing against other fourth liners, guys who are at his skill level or below. Same thing with Jonathan Berggren. Now, Jonathan Berggren, you mentioned Elmer Soderblom, but Berggren's a guy who is actually starting to get looks in top 6 roles, like sporadically throughout games. He's getting slotted in at the top 6. He's also getting power play time. This is a guy who, like, his ceiling is top 6. Like, he could, that is right where he could be. So him, I'm especially like A-okay with giving top 6 minutes. Defensively, though, and Prashant Iyer, to his credit, he had the idea first, and we saw it a little bit in last night's game. Obviously, we saw Seider was great, but Jake Wallman played on a pair with Moritz Seider, and they looked pretty dang good together. And that's not a pairing I would have expected to play well, but they're both young guys. Jake Wallman's a little bit older than Moritz Seider, but still youngish, still an RFA, I believe, or I think he was the G6 UFA. Regardless, my point being, he was the weird one where he would have been like a UFA if he didn't get enough games with the Wings last year, but he's still technically an RFA because he played enough. But
right,
I digress. He's an RFA. He's a younger guy who didn't get a lot of ice time with the St. Louis Blues, kind of like Robbie Fabry, because their lineup was incredibly deep, and so he was a bit sheltered. So he's getting an opportunity now, especially with the injuries to Olli Maatta. The sickness to Olli Maatta and the presumed injury to Filip Hronek, in a top 4 pair role. And in the ice time he spent with Moritz Seider last night, I loved their chemistry. They looked great together. And Jake Wallman has honestly been low-key very impressive in his performances so far. He's a great rush defender. You talk about, so Filip Hronek's really good offensively because he's got a cannon of a shot and picks his times to shoot very well. But Jake Wallman can rush the puck up the ice and get into the offensive zone and create offensive chances on his own. Like, that's the type of offensive style he plays, as opposed to Filip Hronek, who will sneak in late, be that third guy in, and unleash a bomb. They're a little bit different, although Wallman does have an absolute bomb, but he's not necessarily a bust defensively as well. And I think that it could work with Moritz Seider. We'd have to obviously see more, because one of our complaints was Moritz Seider and Ben Sherratt kind of did the same thing. But, chemistry is different from guy to guy. They could play same styles, but just because it's a different guy and they get along better, chemistry could be better. Other defensive pairings, arms are up in the air. I don't know, man, because Comfer is going to play. Osterley has to play. Sherratt has to play. And Lindstrom has to play, because you're literally down. Those are your 6 defensemen right now if Hronek's out. Maybe you call Edvinsson up. He's got 9 points in 18 games played with Grand Rapids. He's looked, he's looking better every game, but I think it's a little bit too early to make that jump still. So anyway, when we come back, we'll break down the preview of the first game of the year against the Ottawa Senators at LCA, happening on Saturday night. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's talk about the preview against the Ottawa Senators, the first game against the Ottawa Senators. And the first thing I want to say before we say anything about the Ottawa Senators is do not discount them. They are currently riding a hot streak. They've won more than they've lost in their last 10 games. The last time I checked, they were like 6-4 and 6-3-1, I believe, in the last 10. It could be even better than that at the moment. But the reason I say this is because if you look at their Corsi for percentage at even strength, they're 7th in the league. When you filter to expected goals for, they are 9th in the league. Their power play is a top 10 power play in the league. The reason why they're 7th in the division right now, Scotty, is because they had an abysmal October and November like they always do. But they're finally getting it together and playing better hockey. So just because you see the Ottawa Senators and you see them 7th in the standings, do not discount them. I would hesitate. I'm not talking to you directly. I'm talking to the listener base. This is a much better Ottawa Senators team than they were a month ago. And it shows up on their stat sheet as well. You got Brady Tkachuk, 33 points in 29 games played. Alex DeBrincat's got 27 and 29. Stützle got 27 28, although he's out and hurt, I believe. And Claude Giroux's got 26 and 29. It goes down from there. And, their goaltending hasn't been horrible either. Cam Talbot's got a 917 save percentage. Anton Forsberg with 908. So this is a much improved Ottawa Senators team than from years past.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, this is a 1 p.m. game, by the way.
1 p.m. So not even Saturday night.
But it's death, it's taxes, and it's Ottawa starting off the season terribly until American Thanksgiving. It's a tale as old as time. They do it every single year. It's the biggest lock of the NHL season, year in and year out. But no, I mean this is certainly a team that has been compared to the Red Wings a lot for obviously, and we talked about it in the offseason. We talked about it leading up to the season. We talked about it in the preseason. That this Sens team is really young and really talented, and they're taking steps in the right direction, even if they get off to their signature slow start. And they're not just some, especially when you're playing them in December. I don't want to keep just driving this point home, but it's not the beginning of the season. So no, this is certainly still a young and talented team, and one that, just because of all of the comparisons to us all the time, I just love beating them, because everybody always loves to compare our rebuilds because they started about the same time and they're exiting at them at about the same time. And it would feel really, really cool to beat them because of that. And that's something that's just always in the back of my mind whenever we play.
Well, not just that. I mean, you're also riding a 4-game losing streak. It's a 1:00 game on a Saturday, so the house should be packed at Little Caesars Arena. So there's a ton of opportunity for the Detroit Red Wings to really right this ship in this game. And Ottawa Senators, like I said, are a good team, but the Red Wings, despite all the injuries, showed a lot of heart during this losing streak. Outside of the Florida Panthers game where they didn't have any heart, they fought hard in Dallas. They fought hard against the Minnesota Wild. It didn't result in goals. But, with the exception of one period in each of those games, they outperformed their opponents in shot attempts. So it's one of those things where, despite the injuries, there are players on this team who are trying to step up. And I appreciate that. In fact, with all these injuries, this is a perfect time for players to step up. This is a perfect time for Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, and Jonathan Berger, and Elmer Soderblom, guys who are presumably the future of this team, to step up and really fill in and be the difference makers on this team. Because you think about it, look at the signings that Stützle just had. I mean, it's not out of the realm of expectation, or the realm of reality, I should say, that guys like Seider and Lucas Raymond could be due an extension in the next year or two, despite being on their rookie contracts, because that's how the way the NHL is going now. Is you sign, you take a little bit of a gamble on your less proven players in the hopes that they can continue their success, because in the long term, you'll have them on a budget and a bargain. So, this is a good opportunity for them to showcase what they can do without the support of the veterans around them.
For sure. And this is a this is a good team, man. This is not just because of the slow start. I mean, this is a really good team that ranks really highly in a lot of areas. This team is very good in the faceoff circle, one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the NHL in the faceoff circle. That obviously doesn't play to you very well, but their special teams is nasty. And like you mentioned earlier, how their 5-on-5 play is now really good lately. So you're talking about a borderline top 5 power play unit in the entire NHL on conversion rate so far, and a borderline top 10 penalty kill so far this season, paired with fringe top 10 5-on-5 numbers for possession metrics and shot metrics. That feels like a good hockey team, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a tall task, man. And again, especially like you said, with a thinning roster because of all the injuries, this is going to have to be a game where players do step up into bigger roles than they're used to, and yeah, and it'll be a doozy.
Well, and you have this as well. Ville Husso's still Ville Husso. And if he is the goaltender who starts, because now remember, you're balancing 3 goaltenders. But if Ville Husso gets the start in this game, and I have no reason to believe he wouldn't, other than just wanting to get Nedeljkovic a rep, because, you got to balance 3 goaltenders, you'll have an opportunity to win this game. He keeps you in games. His save percentage on the season is .918. He's 9th in the league at goals saved above expected. So he's been a fantastic goaltender, and honestly, a fringe. There's a conversation to be had about him being a fringe candidate in the quarter-way mark, halfway mark, third-way mark of the season here for Vezina candidate, fringe for Vezina candidate. But he's been that good. He's kept this team in games that they shouldn't have. So Ville Husso, if he's playing, you have a chance, no matter how thin your roster is, because he's going to give you that chance. Looking at over-unders in this game, Scotty. See, if I doubt BetOnline is going to have the odds yet because we're recording this on Thursday. The game's on Saturday. But we'll just assume that given the 2 teams playing, that the over-under will be set at 6, not 6.5.
I'll take the over.
I'll take the under just because, again, recent history shows Red Wings haven't been scoring a lot of goals. Ottawa Senators definitely been better lately, but if Ville Husso again is starting, I think they're going to run into a bit of a brick wall. So I'm going to take the under again on 6 goals. I was right last time in the Minnesota game, just barely, but I was still right. So let's keep that good feeling going. In terms of the game against Ottawa, man, any final thoughts? Any players you need to see show up? Any players you need to see shut down?
No, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm really just, this stretch feels like it has the makings for, like, if you just are desperately looking for a positive spin on what's been happening, I think that Moritz Seider is going to get a ton of ice time, and Elmer Soderblom is going to get more ice time than we probably anticipated he would too. And those are 2 very fun players to watch that are going to have Seider already is kind of D1, I guess.
Minutes.
Right, but yeah, Soderblom's going to have a lot of opportunity over the next few weeks, and that's at least something to maybe look forward to.
All right, sounds good. Well,
super encouraging ending.
Yeah,
maybe look forward to it, kind of, maybe.
You know what, guys? It's this point during this stretch, kick your feet up and just crack a beer open if you can, if you're of legal age, and don't drive drunk. Make sure you have a ride as well. We just did an ad read about that, but enjoy the game. Don't put any expectations on it. Don't put any stock into it. Just turn it on. Enjoy the fact that you can watch Red Wings hockey at 1:00 on a Saturday, because it's going to be a tough stretch, but we're going to try to make the most of it nonetheless. So we can't change the fact that injuries are happening, but we will enjoy Red Wings hockey to the best of our ability nonetheless, because thank God they exist.
Yes.
There we go. There's your happy note to end the episode on, Scotty. We ball. We'll be back on Monday with a game recap. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.